Discussion and action items. Number one is a presentation on unmanned aerial systems, UASs. So Angelique Gaeta, assistant to the city manager, I believe will give the presentation. There she is. So I'll let you have the floor.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair and members of the Commission. Just a correction on the first slide, although we don't really need to correct it, but it's item G1 that we said, not G2. So tonight, the Police Department and I will provide you with information about programs the Department is exploring that involve the use of cameras. That information will be broken down into two areas, which would include a brief description of the programs being considered and the status of each, and a more detailed discussion with Deputy Chief Dave Hober of the Department's Unmanned Aerial System. And with that, let's get started. So the four programs involving the use of cameras that the police is exploring currently are the registration of privately owned cameras, the stationary cameras in hotspots, body-worn cameras, and then, of course, the unmanned aerial system. Just a brief overview of those four, and then again, Chief Hober will get into the specifics of the UAS with you. To help you distinguish between the four, the registration of privately owned cameras is a program that was recently approved by our City Council. What it does is it allows members of the public to register their information with regard to their surveillance equipment that they have either at their homes or at their businesses, and register that with the police department so that the police department has it at their disposal should they require assistance from the public for investigation of crimes. Obviously, the police department already has a process in place where they go through and walk the neighborhood and see what's available, but this will help them more quickly get into contact with members of the public if they know that cameras are in fact at certain locations, and who the contact person is. It is not live streaming by the police department. It is simply information of who to contact and what type of camera equipment that individual has and where it's located. The police department would reach out to that individual, ask them if they would be willing to share any captured footage with the police department in the event that that footage actually captured evidence of a crime. The program is entirely voluntary, so even if the person is registered and they decide that they would prefer not to provide that footage to the police department, that is also their option. And the police department is working with the city manager's office to implement that program, and we'll return to the neighborhood commission once that program is ready to roll out to give you all the details that you need to give out to your specific districts. The next program is the stationary camera hotspots program, and again, that's another program that was approved by the city council. Per city council direction, the department received funding to install cameras in areas where graffiti is a problem, and those areas were identified by the Mayor's Gang Prevention Task Force that put together a list of hotspots. Again, that's another program that's in the process of being explored, and when we're ready to implement and roll that out, we will return to this commission and give you an update on that program. Those particular cameras would be city-owned property and would be accessible by the police department, and the footage from that would be owned by the city. The third program is the body-worn cameras program, and just as it sounds, this is a program where cameras are worn on officers in the field to capture their interactions with the public. Currently, the city is in discussions with the Police Officers Association regarding a pilot program, and again, staff will return to this commission with an update when that's appropriate. So at this time, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Deputy Chief Dave Hober to give you an in-depth explanation of the Unmanned Aerial System program.
Thank you, Angelique, and good evening, Mr. Chair and Commission. As Angelique said, my name is Dave Hober. I'm a Deputy Chief with the San Jose Police Department. I'm currently in charge of Bureau of Field Operations. I brought some of my staff with me, Captain Tim Porter, who runs our Special Operations Division, Lieutenant Greg Alvin, who's in charge of some of the Special Operations units, and Sergeant Doug Wedge, who is in charge of our bomb unit. And I point them out because if there are some questions, they are the experts who might be able to answer some of those for you. We're going to provide a presentation about the San Jose Police Department's unmanned aerial system known as a UAS, commonly called a drone. There are several purposes for our presentation this evening. One is to provide you with an overview of why the department obtained a UAS. Another is to explain some potential uses for the UAS. And we'd like to obtain input from you as representatives of the community about UAS usage in San Jose. Specifically, is this the right time for this technology in San Jose? We'd like to gather policy considerations you might offer. And finally, we would like your assistance for further community outreach and looking to get input from the community as well about this technology. The San Jose Police Department acquired the UAS to assist the bomb unit in providing safety for bomb technicians and provide situational awareness. The UAS would allow the bomb unit a real-time view of a suspicious item from a distance. Currently, police officers trained as bomb technicians are called out for suspicious items that could be explosive devices and use different ways to approach them to determine if it is in fact an explosive device. It is much safer if bomb technicians can use a robot to approach the device, as it keeps the bomb technician further away from the potential explosive device. The robots currently in use are very expensive and sometimes are constrained as to where they can go. For example, if a potential explosive device is located in a confined area or a myriad of other places, it may limit the use of a specific robot. The UAS would allow bomb technicians an aerial robot that would be able to access hard-to-reach locations and provide a downlink video to the bomb technician to elevate to evaluate the potential explosive device. So that's one aspect. Another is to allow a check and balance, if you will, to ensure that an area is clear if bomb technicians need to do what's called disrupt in place. Sometimes if bomb technicians evaluate a device and believe it could be an explosive, it is at times safer to actually disrupt that device where it is. Sometimes this could simply open the device to reveal that it is not in fact an explosive, or it could be that it actually creates an explosion. If technicians are going to disrupt in place, they need to ensure the area is clear of any persons that may be affected by the potential explosion. They always conduct announcements and physically clear the area before they do this, but the UAS could be used to assist in ensuring the area is clear as well while they are doing this. In a nutshell, the UAS would provide another tool for bomb technicians to utilize when dealing with suspicious devices that would allow for more safety for the technicians and other persons. While the San Jose PD did acquire a UAS in January 2014, it is not currently in use and will not be used unless or until it is determined that this technology is right for San Jose, that the San Jose PD has obtained input from the community and stakeholders, that San Jose PD has developed policies and procedures after obtaining that input, and that the city attorney has reviewed the policies and procedures. The UAS cost $6,965. The San Jose PD obtained the UAS and originally thought the grant funds could be used to cover the cost. However, we have recently learned that grant funding would not pay for the UAS. The UAS is a Century Neo 660 hex rotor. It weighs approximately 1.5 pounds, is approximately 3 feet wide and 1.5 feet tall. It has a Gopro camera that provides downlinked video footage. The UAS is battery operated and has a limited flying time of approximately 15 to 20 minutes and flies using manual radio controls. The UAS cannot lift anything and cannot operate in windy conditions, usually over about 5 or 10 miles per hour. This is a photograph, obviously, of the San Jose Police Department's UAS. You can see the size in relation to a normal electrical outlet in the upper right side of the photo. You can see 6 rotors and a GoPro camera mounted underneath the UAS. We have reviewed and considered various policies and procedures based on research and some community and stakeholder input we have already received. There are several areas that need to be considered when forming policies for the UAS. One is compliance with FAA regulations. Another is compliance with state and federal laws to ensure Fourth Amendment and privacy protections. We have considered supervisory authorization for use, flight documentation and auditing, and image retention schedules. Policies and procedures will be developed before the use of the UAS and will include input from stakeholders. In 2012, the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, established the Unmanned Aircraft Systems Integration Office to develop a comprehensive plan to integrate and establish operational and certification requirements for UAS. It will also coordinate UAS research and development. The FAA is charged with ensuring the safe and efficient use of US airspace and has been tasked with developing a plan for the safe integration of UAS into the National Airspace System by September of 2015. Currently, public entities wanting to operate a UAS must obtain a certificate of waiver or authorization, also known as a COA, from the FAA. The FAA usually puts limits on the COA that tend to include that the UAS is flown under visual flight rules, flown under 400 feet, flown line of sight only, not flown near airports, and flown during daylight only. There were 545 COAs active as of December 2013, according to the FAA. The San Jose Police Department believes that the UAS would be beneficial for use by the San Jose PD bomb squad, as has previously been described. The UAS would also be beneficial in tactical situations where persons' lives are in immediate danger, such as active shooters and hostage or barricade situations. These situations would be geographically confined, time-limited emergency situations in which particular individuals' lives are at risk. Other non-law enforcement but public safety uses could be in search and rescue situations and natural disaster situations, such as checking the structural viability of buildings after an earthquake. The San Jose PD is a contemporary law enforcement agency that is continuously striving to be at the forefront of positive change to better serve the community. Part of this is utilizing the most current technologies. In incorporating technologies to better serve our community and protect our officers, we obtained the UAS. In hindsight, we should have conducted stakeholder outreach prior to obtaining the UAS. In moving forward, in regard to the UAS over the last several months, we have and will continue to outreach to the community and the various stakeholders by reporting out to the San Jose City Council Public Safety, Finance, and Strategic Support Committee, meeting with members of the San Jose PD Chiefs Community Advisory Board, meeting with members of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, Asian Law Alliance, Council on American Islamic Relations, Silicon Valley Debug, and La Raza Roundtable. We advised stakeholders and will continue to advise stakeholders of presentations like tonight so that we can gain more input. Tonight we are presenting to you to gain input from the community and hopefully gain your assistance in that outreach to the community. This concludes our formal presentation, and I certainly can answer any questions, but we are looking for input from you, the Commission, regarding three primary issues. Is UAS technology appropriate for San Jose? We're interested in policy considerations if UAS technology is appropriate. And we're asking for your assistance for further community outreach. And in relation to community outreach, we would propose that a next step may be to schedule a community meeting probably on a Saturday between 12 and noon, maybe here at City Hall in the month of December, so that we can continue with our community outreach. And with that, I'd certainly like to hear from you and answer any questions.
So, thank you. Questions? Nick?
Thank you. I'm Nick Lowoski, District 10 Council, the Commission member. I have a lot of support and a bit of knowledge about some of these programs. In our neighborhood, we had a rising tide of crime, home burglaries, and I took it upon myself about 2 years ago to put in private security cameras not only in my home, but on the home of some neighbors that were colleagues of mine in the neighborhood association. It drove down crime to about 15% of what it was when it was spiking for home burglaries, when home burglary calls were not being answered, and quite frankly, residents were frustrated. We also got at least the forensic data from that camera, got at least one perpetrator of B&E put in jail, prosecuted, and is now paying restitution to the victim. So I see how cameras in stationary or otherwise can be very, very helpful law enforcement and really make an impact on the community as it relates to lowering crime. You have a heck of a PR problem on your hands here. I was at the, I think we all probably know that. I was at the city council meeting where this was discussed and referred to this commission, and that was a popular meeting. There were a lot of people there. The ACLU spoke out against it. I didn't take a position on it, and I did take a position on the private use of cameras, but not as a commission member, as a private individual. I think you have to do more than the outreach that you described, and perhaps this is part of your plans already. I think some demonstrations of what the drone is. People, when they hear drone, they think Bush and Obama's war drones that have been so effective, again, the war on terror and in foreign lands. That's what people think of. They think of an armed military assault aerial vehicle. And of course, that's not what this is at all. But it's not a toy either. And there is certainly big considerations of personal privacy. People are worried about the thing hovering over in their backyard and looking into the windows, which is a real fear. How unfounded it's come. So perhaps a lot of demonstrations out in the community, I for one would offer that we could have one in the Elmwood and Winery neighborhood as a start, which is, we have a nice park there. We have to show the community what it looks like. Perhaps media would like to cover that, and get people to make a first-hand informed decision as to whether it makes sense as an individual resident of San Jose, rather than just taking the word for controlling legal authority. So that would be my suggestion overall. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Robert.
Robert Sandoval from District 7. The question can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. The question I have is, has there been failures on this robot type we're discussing tonight? If there has, how many of those failures have happened?
Sir, when you say failures, you mean where it stopped working and then crashed?
Right, exactly.
I don't know, but I know that in doing the research in the FAA that is one of their considerations, and when they give the COA, they specifically want to know that your device is not going to crash and injure people on the ground. But that is certainly one of the considerations. I don't know the answer to how many times that has happened. I did read in the newspaper that I know it's happened at least once, and probably more.
You read the same thing I read. That's the reason I asked this question. I, for one, also, because of the high rate of crime that we have in our city currently, would support a unit like this. And the cost factor to operate this, can I ask that question?
Yes. The device was just under $7,000, and I've asked my staff how much we thought it would cost to operate. The only ongoing cost that we see would be if we had to replace batteries, or if for some reason there was some damage done to it. So I don't know exactly how much that would cost. Doug, do you have a better understanding of that?
You're right, Chief. It would be really minimal. It's not a real expensive.
The batteries are rechargeable?
The batteries are rechargeable, but after a period of time, I mean, it's like any other piece of technology, you might need to replace those kinds of things.
And it's a unit that the police department really needs, and that would benefit them in attempting to stop crime.
I believe in the specific examples that I've given, there would be a great use for it. It would certainly keep my bomb technicians safe if they didn't have to approach certain devices. And I don't even know how much we would use it, because in many circumstances we can use other robots that we have. But there are some circumstances that we can't use those robots because they're limited to where they can get. And in those circumstances where I could have a bomb technician fly over a device and have a downlink to look at what's going on with a potential explosive device, it would offer them safety and be very beneficial to them.
I'm like my other associate member, I'm in approval of that, and I will support that.
So, Gary?
Yeah, Gary Cunningham, District 1. Have you done any studies of other law enforcement agencies that have used these, and what the results are, how effective they are? What's the statistical data on the use of these when they're deployed? Also, you're going to have someone who's trained in operating this, flying this.
So in regard to looking at other agencies, we have reviewed information. I don't have any specific statistical data on that. And different agencies use these devices for different things. In Mesa County, Colorado, they use it for doing traffic reconstruction, where they go over a certain location that there's been an accident to do those kinds of things. And different agencies use them for different things. In San Jose, what we would like to use it for is specifically for these explosive devices, and also for potential issues where somebody's life could be immediately in danger, like an active shooter or a hostage or barricade situation. That is primarily what we're focused on using this for.
And I appreciate it, but there are other situations in other areas that they've had these in use, that they've addressed these issues, and were they successful, or what were the results?
I don't know that specifically to those two things that they have used. It's a very new technology. Many of the agencies who have tried to obtain or deploy these devices, some of them have decided not to go forward with it. So there's only very few that are actually using it for these specific things. Doug, are you aware of any other agencies that have used it for explosive device?
There's none that we know of now. I know Arizona, King County, Arizona has used it. It is not, this particular aircraft, UAS, cannot really fly long enough to do any kind of investigative work other than get a situational awareness of what's going on in a particular scene.
Can you do me a favor and come up here, and we'll just have you sit up here, Doug, and then you can talk into the microphone.
I don't have any problem with Chief. I don't have any problem with the mission that you feel this would fit into. I just kind of like to see, make comparisons to see where they've used something in similar situations, and you had some results that were, hopefully positive.
Right, and we have not used ours in any type of a situation here, but the reason I'm asking, Doug, is because they haven't been widely used, so there's not a lot of use going on out there right now, but there are specific agencies that are using them for different things. I don't have a specific knowledge of a situation where we're describing that it has been used.
So we would be more or less the pathfinders or the leaders in this, and be the sort of prototypes in deploying to this and the use of it.
We would be one of the first agencies, if not the first, in Northern California to use this.
Or the United States.
But there are some in other parts of the United States that are using them. But I don't know specifically that they're just using it for this.
Thank you.
And just to clarify a point that Chief Hober made earlier on the article that Commissioner Sandoval read, we have not used the UAS in this city. It has not been deployed in the city. It appeared that we were saying that we had used it and it failed once in the city, and that's not the case in San Jose.
Yeah, I'll clarify that. I was talking about where it failed somewhere else. No, we have not used it in San Jose in an operational manner.
Juan Estrada, Commissioner for Council District 5. And I appreciate that the Police Department is reaching out to the Neighborhoods Commission for input. And my preliminary thinking is that limiting the scope to certain situations is the best way to move forward if we move forward with it. I'm most interested in what our timeline is for gathering community feedback and providing it back. And I'm hopeful that we can get a summary of the feedback that's been provided by the stakeholders referenced during the presentation, and a copy of any draft policy, just whatever stage of it's in at this time. I think that that will help us as we try to get feedback, and I have no questions.
So, Norma?
Yes, I know some of my questions are going to be very basic and probably uneducated type. But when I look at this and I look at your outline, like one, I'm not really getting the guts of what's under the outline, and I would need to do more research to learn more about this UAS. And one of my questions is that I saw here that you put it would not be used, it would be used for large crowds. What do you, well, I mean, would not be, what would you consider the use, what would you consider the purpose of the use for a crowd at all?
No, we wouldn't, that's not a use that we want to use.
Okay,
Okay. It's not for a crowd, watching crowds at all.
yes, okay. And another question, what would the difference, what would the feedback be from this camera on this UAS versus the camera taken by a helicopter? You know, because I know that when there are dangerous situations, often you'll see that helicopters are deployed.
Yes. So what this device has on it is a GoPro camera, which is commonly, my 16-year-old son has a GoPro that when he goes mountain bike riding, that's what he uses to film things. So a GoPro camera works very well, but it also is not as sophisticated as some of the other cameras that police agencies have on helicopters and aircraft. So actually the camera on this device is not as sophisticated as some of the, as the camera that we have on the helicopter, or that we can take up into an airplane or helicopter to take photographs.
I will have to do more research to educate myself. Thank you.
Dan?
Thanks, our District 9. Taking a look at it, did you indicate that you had already gotten a COA for the device?
We have not.
Okay, so you haven't gotten one as of yet. And one thing I could definitely see would be if something like this was employed for the uses as specified there, that should be something that the public should see, have record of when, and essentially audit the use of that within the field, so that whenever it is used, there's record of it, locations of where it was used and stuff like that. Beyond the audit capabilities, would there be, there might be considerations for making that video public and accessible by the community for any incident that occurred that you used it for?
So, in regard to that, depending on the video that we obtain, for example, if we had the video and we downlinked it and Doug and his technicians were downlinking that so that they could look at it, and we decided that we were going to record it, if it became something that was a matter that we were going to prosecute somebody, that we were able to locate that person and now we're going to prosecute them for creating this and having this explosive device, then it would fall under the regulations or rules of what we do with criminal evidence. But that's certainly something that we need to look into, and that's one of the questions and one of the things that's come up is, are you going to have video? Are you going to keep video? What's the video going to be of? What is your retention schedule going to be? Those are all things that we need to work through as well, and that's what we'd like to hear from. We have different retention periods that are already kind of in place in the city, and rules and regulations that we follow as far as if it does become part of a criminal investigation and those kinds of things. And those also would then direct what we could or could not share with the public.
Okay, could also follow up that, yes, I know that on the police department's existing website with all of the location of incidents that occur, something like that could be also identifiable on the map there to see where incidences occurred with drone usage, potentially. Thank you.
I'm going to ask a bunch of questions of my own now, and then I'll go around afterwards. So the first thing, looking bomb surveillance makes perfect sense, and then hostage situations, well, of course, but then I start seeing all these other things, pursuit, that sounds good. I'm seeing mission creep. You might want to do it for other things too, so I worry. First of all, is your command and control of the thing encrypted? You don't want the bad guy to get a little joystick and have it crash into you, so you have to make sure you have very strong encryption of yourself. Make sure your downlink data is encrypted. You don't want somebody with a scanner watching to see where they're looking for you so they know how to hide. You don't want people with police scanners getting pictures of what's going on in the backyards. Who shares your pictures? I mean, you're chasing the bad guy running across the fence, and code enforcement says, hey, I see an illegal addition in the backyard there. How are you going to follow all that type of stuff? You're saying that the cameras have a 15-minute span right now, and it's just a Gopro camera, which has some resolution, but technology is improving. So in 2 years, you're going to have one with a 30-minute camera, and a couple of years from now, you're going to get 3D imaging on it. So we need to come up with rules for all of these things. Can this thing be used indoors? Use it in an auditorium and wander around? Is that a place you might want to use? You could use it. How do you keep other people from getting these drones? You have to go through all this permit process, but you can get simple ones down at the, or at least they used to sell them at the shopping mall. They could fly theirs up and try to run into yours and disable yours. How easy is it to make countermeasures? I'm just thinking, somebody puts up some helium balloons to block the path of the thing. You need a warrant for these things. I mean, if you're going to go over people's yards and collect data, maybe what are the rules that are in place right now for the police helicopters? I mean, they can take data too, so are there already established rules for that? And can this be based off of that? Or that be as a starting point? And also the state of California was working on some drone rules that I understand did not get passed at the last minute, but I understand it had some good starting points in it. Maybe we can look at that too. I said I don't want to just toss it out for you.
Okay, did you want me to respond to some? Okay,
Sure.
So I'll start with the state of California, and yes, there was some legislation passed, and recently the governor vetoed that. And that legislation, I believe, specifically stated that that they wanted to have a warrant every time that a UAS was used. And some other things, I'm sure. That's just generally what I understand of that. In regard to the case law surrounding helicopters, there is case law that says that if aircraft are being utilized and they're at a place that they can legally be, and they can see things with cameras and those kinds of things, that it is legal for the police to take pictures and do those kinds of things. And so that could set up some of the case law, and I think it will set up, but I think in reading some of the articles and some of the information that the ACLU has put forward, they make the point that going forward and pointing out some of the decisions of the Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court has struggled with this a little bit too, in talking about we're looking at things now before this technology has really progressed, and as technology progresses, is that progression going to outpace the current laws that we have? And so certainly that's a starting point for us. We are absolutely, if it's determined that we're going to use this device, going to ensure that we are complying with all laws. We are not interested in violating any of those laws or doing anything that would start to impinge on the privacy rights that we have, and that we want our community to understand that we understand those, and we want to have policies put into place for those kinds of situations. In the circumstances that we're talking about right now, with explosive devices, or with situations where people's lives are in danger, those are exigent circumstances. And even in the literature that the ACLU has, some of it has put out, they specifically talk about that those are times that they think it would be good as long as we have privacy protections put into place. And that's kind of the process we're going through right now, is we want to hear these kinds of things so that we can put this policy into place. But as you've described, you said that you had a whole lot of questions. There's a whole lot to this, and there's a whole lot of stuff that we're trying to think about, but technology outpaces a lot of our case law and other things as well. So I think we do need to be thinking about these things. You brought up mission creep, and I think that, you were talking about a pursuit, you were talking about if we were chasing somebody. Right now, that's not what we're looking at. And I've heard this, some of the input has been concerned about mission creep. I think the way that we deal with that is that if we decide we're going to use this, we put policies in place. We put those policies in place for some of the very limited things that we're talking about now, and we don't change it. But if we start thinking about, okay, we would like to now venture into another area, then we wouldn't change that unless we came back to the council or to the community and said, hey, this is something that we're interested in using it for now, but clearly we wouldn't do that because we would codify in our policy as to the limited times that we could use it to deal with some of those protections. I think that covers most of it. Oh, the encrypted, I'll let Doug talk to whether that information is encrypted.
This one is not encrypted right now at all. It's radio frequency or RF based. Could someone jam that signal or get on that frequency? Probably potentially they could.
Give me a week, I'll
It's
have
more-
my own
more
pictures.
potentially, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is not,
It's
I
not
think you'll be
potential.
encrypted, I mean,
it's real.
It's real,
also, are you using visible cameras? I mean, you could use night vision, go over at night and look for warm bodies. I mean,
Well, this camera is,
this particular camera won't, but technology would let you very soon, not right now. Do we want to have policies against it, or do we want policies enabling?
But right now, we don't have an interest in using a camera that can look at heat from the UAS, and certainly we could write that into the policy at this time. But no, that's not something that we're interested in using it for. And actually, I don't know that this UAS could actually, it's a very light, 2.5 pound device, and I don't think it would be able to carry that kind of camera. Now, I don't know, maybe there's technology that has smaller cameras, but that's not something that we're interested in using it for.
Well, let some other people ask some questions.
David Dearborn, District 6. Thank you for the presentation. I'm impressed. That covered an awful lot, everything I could imagine at this time. Are there plans, or would there be in a policy an arrangement where the technician, the operator, and your agency could share this, or would share this, with other departments in the city for emergency situations, search and rescue, natural disaster, as you pointed out in the presentation, occasionally lost child. This is a 180 square mile city with 1 million people, and we're a thin agency on the officers per 100,000. Something like this could really facilitate some situations that you may not have mentioned.
So certainly we could incorporate into the policies if that was something that we were directed, or that we felt we were getting some input, that people wanted us to use it for that. Certainly with search and rescue and disasters, I think I read that a UAS was used after the earthquake up in Napa recently. So those could be some things. I know there are some concerns from some of the privacy groups about law enforcement actually operating it when it's being used for those things. But realistically, I think somebody else brought up the training that would occur. And this is one of the things too, we talk about the case law that hasn't really caught up. The FAA is having a heck of a time trying to catch up to this as well. And we have outreach to the FAA to look into getting a COA. I think somebody else asked, the reason we haven't gotten it yet is we want to ensure that this is something that we want to do before we invest the time in that, because there's some time to deal with that. But one of the things they talk about is what types of training, and they haven't fully developed this yet, what types of training, they call them pilots, that your pilots are going to have, and what exactly that requires. So certainly, we wouldn't want to just loan it to somebody else, because it's not just a regular remote control. It's something that we need training, and there are considerations that somebody else brought up that we don't want it to crash and those kinds of things. So I think that certainly these are other ideas that it could potentially be used for, but we'd have to see where we are with that and if people would want us to use it for those things.
Mr. Chairman.
Let's see, I saw his hand first.
Oh, I just said, I had two numbers for cost. I had something $965, and then I heard a $7,000 number.
I said just under 7,000, but it was actually 6,000.
Oh, maybe I wrote it down wrong. I had 965 down. I didn't write that number.
Okay,
Thank
so,
you.
let's see, Dan, you had a question? Oh, CEO Moses.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Robert.
Robert?
I'll let Moses, I spoke once, I'll let Moses, then I'll follow him.
And just to clarify, it's I had raised $6,965 and
Right,
a couple
yeah.
of cents.
Thank you. Also, this whole community organizations on the radio-controlled aircraft that for years have been doing this with radio-controlled aircraft. So there are people there you can probably reach out to for some do's and don'ts and things that they encounter as far as, operability and all that training. These are obvious, that I know, I've seen them flying around here, so you can reach out to these people and get some good information.
Great. Okay, Moses?
My name is Moses. I'm from the 7th District. I'm a commissioner here. I had a lot of questions in my mind, and you answered quite a few of them, the people's rights that you have to deal with also. And listening to everything you're saying, 15 minutes to me is insufficient time. It's not enough to really get a full picture of the problem, the crime. And then also, how long does it take for getting a drone into a crime scene? Is it after the fact? Or do you get it right there when it's happening? I think that you should go for the 30 minutes. And the other thing that I see is it takes the PD out of harm's way when you have a vehicle that can do all the, take the guesswork out of the problem. So I think maybe we ought to go for broke. Not 15 minutes, but let's wait till we get something that can handle many more problems. That's what I'm thinking.
Let's see. Okay, your turn.
Two quick questions. What model GoPro cameras does UAS use?
It's GoPro's latest, it's called the G3. You can buy it at REI, a number of places.
And that's what will be in use in this UAS, right?
Yeah.
Also, how is GoPro camera signals transmitted? By WIFI, or how would the signals be
It's
transmitted?
a video, like a video downlink, a wireless video downlink.
And that was my last two questions. Thank you.
Okay, let's see. I guess it's your turn. Nick.
Great. I'm Nick Lewandowski again from District 10. A few months ago, we had a lost child that was, took until, I think it was 3 in the morning until he was discovered by the homeless encampment in the other part of town, and not for lack of trying by search and rescue and SJPD. My son and I raced over there when we got the Amber to see if we could help, but you guys had handled and didn't need outsiders in the process, in the way. This would have been a perfect example of how it could have been used. So establishing your cross-training program prior to going and doing your community outreach and having search and rescue present at those community outreach meetings where you're doing demonstrations would probably underline the effectiveness of this tool across different departments, but also, of course, having a policy in place that is demarks off where the use of the drone and criminal investigation stops as it relates to challenging privacy issues. So that cross-training policy would be a really good thing along with their presence at the community outreach meetings.
So I do want to address the one issue of demonstrations. We're not in a position where we could do demonstrations because first we have to have the COA and we have not tried to obtain that yet and probably wouldn't until we knew that this was something that we're going forward with. So after, if we decided this was something we wanted to do, that would probably be a good thing that if we could show through demonstration. But until that time, until we work through some of these policy issues, we wouldn't be able to actually bring it out and fly it.
Paul, comment? Paul, comment? Perhaps the organization my colleague talked about that is a hobbyist organization has tons of experience in this area. At the right time, of course, you still want your policies in place. And even if you wouldn't want to lift off with your drone, perhaps they could be part of the outreach as well. That brings the community in.
Great.
Thank you.
One last question, then I want to get the public also. So,
Sure, okay.
so
after hearing all this feedback, what I'm thinking is, what I hear the police department saying is it will be a limited scope. And so I think then that maybe what could be considered is a pilot, right? And so you want to test the waters, not necessarily wait until everything's been perfected, and set a deadline for reviewing the pilot and determining whether to make changes. I heard something about the ACLU being okay with certain uses, and so again, if the Neighborhoods Commission, get that stakeholder feedback so that we can then get feedback from the community, that would be great. In terms of seeing a demonstration, I'm thinking the police department identifies 1 or 2 YouTube videos that show this technology being used. It's something that we could share so that people could see what it looks like and how it's used, etc. And so I'm hopeful that after all the community questions, we can get to what the next steps are in terms of the Neighborhoods Commission.
I'm smiling because I've already seen it in use. I was in Minnesota and one was flying over me and I thought, hey, neat. Hey, why is it following me? And started getting nervous after 5 minutes. So I'd actually seen it. And anyhow,
Mr. Chair. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes?
Ann Grabowski with Councilmember Roach's office. I appreciate the commission grappling with the issue and starting to really digest it. I think it might be helpful for the commission and the community before public comment if the police department could comment on your timeline for policy development. You talked about another meeting in December, but what your timeline is for vetting this, and then also if you already have one or when you would plan to have a draft scope of policy considerations so that they can start to fill in the gaps for additional policy needs.
So as far as the timeline, we don't have a specific timeline. We wanted to do outreach to the community, and we have not started to draft any policy either, because really the first question that we kind of wanted to answer was, is this something right for San Jose? Because if the answer is no, then we weren't going to go through that process. I'll also say that the police department's grappling with a whole lot of issues right now, and this is just one project. And so we want to work on this. This is important to us. But in looking at a timeline, we have to make something that's reasonable, given kind of what we get from here. What is your thought on, we considered another community meeting? Is that good? Is that enough with just one more community meeting and then we start a pilot from there? Or should we do more? And once we get that, then I kind of envision that based on that, if the answer to the first question is yes, this is right for San Jose, and the guidelines are that we want it to be limited to these specific things, that then we draft that policy and report back out either to the PISFIS community or to the council and kind of tell them what we're doing. So I don't know what that timeline looks like until I kind of hear from here, and that's why we wanted to talk to you.
Sure. Then as a follow-up, I would just encourage the commissioners and members of the community, as you give additional input, to think in that context about what the commission thinks is appropriate for outreach and how it can facilitate that or be a partner in that. And then from the community, what you would expect your police department and your neighborhood commissioners to do in terms of outreach, and to answer that question first so that we can be effective with how we problem solve this.
David Dearborn again. If we're going to proceed with an outreach further into the community broadly, I think it would help if we had something to respond to rather than what appears to be informed, semi-informed, uninformed, and impressions and gut feelings about what we're talking about. So if there's some way you could put on the table some framework of questions, ideas, issues, in simple form, pros and cons, things you want from us. That would help steer the thought process and discussion as opposed to tossing it out and saying, what do you think? Your feedback might be more well-informed.
Okay, so let me go get questions from the audience. Either parents, do you want to collect, does anybody have speakers cards? Come on up and you get 2 minutes each. And I recognize Bob.
Yeah. If you don't recognize me by now, you gotta quit.
You must be thinking of a tall person. My name is Bob Sipple, and I am one of the members of the Community Advisory Board for the Police Department. I'm also president of 2 neighborhood associations. When I heard about this initially, I thought, well, I better start my homework right now. So I'm not so much going to ask a question, but I'm going to share with what I learned by investigating myself. Some have not been mentioned yet. I went to one meeting where several police departments were looking at these. I will not mention their names because there was privacy issues with it. Some of them were impressed, some of them were not, but I got quite an education out of it. Most of the departments, however, are looking for similar situations to what we are with limited access, because unless you're one of the civilian population that's already been doing this for a couple of years, and by the way, I learned that they ought to be teaching us, because if you want to see them fly, they're over in Sunnyvale, they're down at any park there is, and they're already out there flying everywhere. So if you're looking for privacy issues, you might even want to look at the civilian population. But anyway, back to this. What I also found out is that the greater number of crashes were in training, learning how to fly it, which would make sense to me. And that also makes sense why the FAA does not want it over the top of a large crowd. In the event there was perhaps a collision or a circumstance, they don't want it crashing into the crowd. So that's one of the reasons the FAA rules are as tight as they are. I did also find in several other states, civilian populations have given these for use, and they have used them and found people in search and rescue and other things other than mentioned today. So what I learned from this was, yes, there is a privacy issue, and I certainly want to see the rules in place to prevent anything from happening. Thank you. And but as I learned from this has great value. It's a limited amount of money, quite frankly, for what it could afford. And we also have to think of our police officers as human beings. And if it could save their lives and others too, it's a great thing.
5 seconds left.
Thank you. Marta Rodriguez.
Good evening. I have a couple of questions regarding the issue that we're discussing. What the policies, I think you stated that you haven't made any policies yet because you wanted to get input first, but it seems that we can't give real input until we have an understanding of how this equipment will be used. I think it has to go together. It can't be something that we can consider later once we've said yes, if let's consider it. We have to know how it's going to be used, the restrictions, for privacy protection of the citizens. Also, I wanted to know how many drones do you plan on having, because it seems you have one at this point, but I would think that you have already looked ahead, because one is not going to be able to do the job that it would require. And also, it was mentioned about having access, the public having access to the recordings, but then I believe I heard the chief say that sometimes you don't record. So I think one of the safety, the policies for safety for the privacy of citizens would be, do we have a record of any time that the drone will be used, whether it's being recorded or not? Because that is going to, regardless of whether it's being recorded, depending on the area that it's in, the drone is in, it's still going to be invading somebody's privacy, or possibly invading somebody's privacy. So I think that we would like to know as citizens if we're being watched, even if it's not being recorded. And also for the neighborhood committee, I would like to know on your part, what is, how do you reach out to the community? Because I was not aware, I barely was made aware of this meeting tonight, earlier today. And I think that maybe that needs to be also, there needs to be more effort to reach out to the community to make us aware of these kinds of issues when they're being discussed and being presented to the public. Thank you.
Thank you. Samina Usman?
Hi, thank you very much for addressing the neighborhoods associations and to address the rest of the community's concerns. Actually, I had a clarifying question first. You had said early on that this would not be covered by the federal grant. Is this correct?
Yes, we initially thought that it's a reimbursable grant, and so we thought that that would cover it, but we have recently learned that it would not.
So then where would these funds be coming from?
The funds are from the police department's general fund.
Okay, got it. All right, so would any of these, the money be used from federal grants at all, or, so the whole entire thing would be from the police department?
Yes.
Okay, got it. So I know we had previously, spoken about this before, but I think some of the questions that need to be considered if the city does decide to keep the drone is how long will the information be kept for? Will the information be shared with federal agencies as well? I think, the gentleman, Larry, had asked some great questions in terms of, how can we ensure that this information will be protected, will be kept safe? I think, specifically talking about the Muslim community, I think that is very concerned that this surveillance technology could be used for surveillance on the Muslim community. I know that with the NYPD, they had been accused of, it has been found that they have been singling out Muslim leaders, businesses, restaurants, student groups, and other organizations for surveillance, and using remotely controlled cameras aimed at these institutions as well. So I think that would be a concern. We just need to make sure that if indeed the drone is kept, we have these policies in place to ensure that it would not be used to single out particular communities and to make sure that it would not be infringing on people's First Amendment rights or their right to privacy as well. So I think that's one of the major concerns for the community.
Thank you. Charlotte Casey?
Good evening. Thank you for coming tonight to address the Commission and the public on this very important issue. I'm with the San Jose Peace and Justice Center, and I believe that the answer about whether it's appropriate would be no. This is not the appropriate technology for San Jose. And I think that's because there's two big concerns in the community throughout the country, really. And one is militarization of the police. That's become a big issue of concern to people. And the drones, since I would have to disagree with the gentleman from District 10, they are a terrible policy that our government is waging with the military drones, the CIA drones in other countries. Civilians have been killed and terrorized in many countries with these drones. So the idea of the drones, I understand that they're not armed, but the idea of surveillance drones right away makes people fearful. Second is the whole atmosphere that we live in of Big Brother, of spying, of data collection by our own government and by private corporations like Facebook and Google. So NSA spying on us, Google gathering our information, all these kind of Big Brother scenarios also mean that the idea of a spy drone flying overhead is something that would make people wary and distrustful of the police. And we live in an atmosphere right now where we want to build closer ties of the community with the police, not have this distancing technology, but we want community policing, we want better ties with the police. And the police are there to protect and serve, not to spy on us. So we feel very strongly that we should not be the first community in Northern California to have the drone. And we have gathered over 1,600 signatures on a petition that says we should send the drone back. So I'm going to present those signatures to you now.
Whoever you want. Thank you.
It's going to be, it's directed to Mayor Reed and the City Council, but we're happy to give you a copy.
Maybe, is this just a copy?
Yes.
This isn't the original? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Joyce Benavides.
Hello. I live right here off San Fernando Street. My daughter does, my best friend does. And just 2 weeks ago, we were on 4th Street at the intersection, and a drone was flying and almost crashed into the windshield of a VTA bus. And in order to miss the bus, he almost knocked the guy off his bike. And there were a lot of pedestrians around, and we almost went through a red light, witnessing the whole thing. Just the way, when you have something flying and buzzing around your ear, your face, even animals do this, it's just natural to swat at. That's exactly what's going to happen. I guarantee it. I've done my own survey. I've surveyed working class youth in East San Jose and downtown, bankers, fast food people. 100% of everyone I talk to does not want to be spied on by drones. We had a barbecue in our backyard. There was a drone, this was only 2 months ago, flying over our backyard. It was mostly girls, but I tell you what, none of my friends want to come back because of the idea of someone's just spying on us. My roommates, upstairs, they don't have curtains. These old 100-year-old houses, there's no curtains upstairs. Everything has changed over that one drone. Young ladies don't like it. Almost all young ladies don't like being followed, don't like being spied on. People that have been taken advantage of don't like it. The other thing is, as far as cost goes, please consider the cost of damages that will be caused by people throwing things or shooting things or even flying their own drones on trying to knock these things down. And what's going to happen when those projectiles hit things or cause people to crash? It's a reality. Please consider it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike Favela.
Hello, I'm Mike Favela. I was born and raised in East San Jose, spent a lot of time on West San Jose. I too didn't find out about this meeting until actually watching the 5 o'clock news. I have a couple things that worry me about the entire UAS situation, since it is different than a military drone. One of them would be the fact that it starts off right now as a great thing, which I do support in the way that the SJPD wants to use it. My worry is, as technology progresses, when will it stop, and when is it that you guys are going to be able to do all sorts of things? And I agree that it would be good for a bomb situation in which we can help our cops and save their lives. But what I'm worried about is what kind of situation, what are the guidelines for it to be a bomb situation? It seems that there's too many vague things happening around this this whole policy which we're attempting to form. One thing I wanted to point out about the natural disasters was saying the occurrence of an earthquake, which we're using it to survey a building. If we don't trust a man to go in and survey the building, why are we going to waste time on that and think about using that building still? Another thing also is how many situations have there been regarding a bomb situation or a hostage situation in San Jose within the past couple of years? It's a question to the SJPD.
How many bomb calls have you had approximately last year?
So There's a lot of things that constitute a bomb squad response. It could be an unattended bag, a suspicious package. We do bomb sweeps for VIPs. So I will narrow it down to, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but your question is, how many actual devices have we had?
Well, how many, in general, how many bomb threats have we had where you guys suspect there being a bomb in the situation?
Well, believe it or not, we roll on, there's a difference between a threat and an actual response, so I'm going to stick with response. But we average about 3 to 5 responses every 2 weeks.
And in how many of those situations would a drone or a UAS that we're attempting to pass, would that if it helped?
That's a really good question. Majority of them, we wouldn't need a drone. I will delve into one scenario that speaks directly to the UAS. And that is, I believe it was 2 years ago, don't hold me to that. We had a car stop occurred on First Street at Matrix across from the new casino. They found an actual live device in the car. The device was such that it needed to be disrupted there. So we created a perimeter. It was nighttime, or becoming nighttime. And somehow, the perimeter was clear. When we got ready to do the disruption, we made all our clearing the area, sirens, loudspeaker calls, and basically what happened was right about the time we were ready to disrupt it, we had an individual get inside the perimeter and be within 5 feet of it. Had we had the drone or the UAV able to clear that area, go up, fly the perimeter for maybe 2 minutes, a minute, we would have seen that, and we almost had a serious issue. Luckily, one of the perimeter police officers was able to see that someone had gotten inside the building. So this has happened. It would have been very useful to have UAS up during that specific instance. Unfortunately, especially with some of our manpower issues, it's going to be tough to have enough police officers on that perimeter while the rest of the city we're dealing with calls for service. So in that instance, it would be what I would call a force multiplier.
And one more thing, I do understand that with the election of our new mayor, one of the main concerns or goals that he's going to attempt to do is to make it so that there is more police officers in the San Jose Police Department. So, with this news of more police officers and more aid coming to our big city, why is it that there's more of a push now for the drones when there's going to be more manpower on the streets?
I think that anything that we have with technology, the technology helps us. And it helps us with all of the different things that we try to do, no matter the number of officers that we have and don't have. The more that we look at technology and how it helps us, it's not just police work, it's everything, like these iPhones that we have and those kinds of things. It helps us do a lot of things. And technology helps us in a multitude of ways.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else from the public want to comment? I thank everybody for commenting. So I'm trying to figure out where we go from here. This has been an information for us. We talked about having a public, hosting a public forum, Ernest. Do you have details on that?
Yes, and I'll speak loudly.
Or here.
Yes, Mr. Chair. When the discussions originally were had about 3 weeks ago, one of the suggestions was that the commission possibly look at hosting a neighborhoods commission session on a Saturday. PD asked that the first part of December might be a good time to host such a meeting. 2 potential dates emerged. One was Saturday, December 6th, and the second was Saturday, December 13th. I double-checked with Event Services this afternoon, and unfortunately, Saturday, December 13th is out because there's already a booking there. So at this point, you've got Saturday, December 6th, and I have reserved the room on hold. I haven't filled out all the paperwork depending upon what the commission decides to do. So part of what you can discuss this tonight, there's clearly a couple of issues that seem to have emerged. One is, does the commission want to host a community meeting to outreach to the community as part of a process of engaging community and giving feedback to the police department? So that would require a motion by someone on the commission. Secondly, you're also looking at, in terms of future actions, potentially having a conversation to ask the question, is that enough outreach? Do you want to go into each council district? Do you want to host 4 potential meetings? That's a different discussion. But it seems like what PD is asking specifically for is they'd like the next step sometime in the early part of September. The commission should then decide what other steps they want to do to keep engaging the community along with PD to get a sense of how the question is, is this appropriate for the city of Madison?
And the time that you had reserved the room was about 10 to noon or something?
Yeah, I've got it reserved for 10 to noon. Potentially I could move it around from noon beyond. The reason I always suggest community meetings occur from 10 to noon is because community neighbors have things they do on Saturdays, and so as a result, if you host in the morning, that gives neighbors time to go out in the afternoon and do whatever they need to do on that day, and they won't lose the whole day.
I'd like to make a motion. We should go ahead with supporting a community meeting, but I'm not so sure that downtown City Hall is the best place for that. Perhaps it should be out in the community somewhere in an auditorium where there could be rain or shine sort of event, and perhaps there could be a demonstration involved.
How big of a room is this? Is it this room or a larger room?
Actually, what I reserved is this room plus the expansion of the next room.
So the seating is about 149, it says.
Right. And the reason I suggested this venue is that it's close to transportation for folks. That's important. That's important. So people, anyone can use public transit to get here on a weekend. For example, folks with handicaps can use the transit system at that time. It's accessible to the public, and we've held venues here which have been successful in making outreach on various topics of interest to the community. It's up to you to decide how you want to do that.
We would not have this as a council, as a commission meeting with the table taking up all the space. It'd be more of a...
It would be more of a
moderated,
facilitated discussion.
so you can get more people in the room here.
Right. Potentially, we have had community meetings where we filled the room before on a Saturday. So it's up to you. I know Commissioner Lebowski saying, another venue. Certainly, you've talked about that in the past as far as moving it out into the neighborhoods itself. So that's a discussion for you folks to have. But I've got a tentative hold on this room, so
if we fill this room and there's a lot of questions left over, we can decide to have more meetings.
Certainly, that's part of the discussion about what other meetings you need to have beyond one. Is one sufficient enough? But certainly you can host one and then have a continuing discussion as to how you want to put out the outreach plan.
So I have asserted a motion.
Okay, Juan, do you want a second or do you want a discussion? So the motion is to host the meeting here December 6th.
You got to start someplace in that.
Motion.
I actually have a question. It's a question of great concern because of the comments made by the young lady over there who actually experienced the drone. I know I got here late and I was taking notes, and I see in my notes it said that the drones were not currently in use because you didn't use the word prerequisites, but there are prerequisites that are required and policies and procedures before they go out. And since I've been absolutely so busy, I must admit that I have not had time to keep up with any of this. But one of the things that I misquoted before was that, for instance, you said it would never be used in large crowd situations. But I'm getting the impression from the young woman who spoke that this must have been a crowded situation and almost
It was a private.
it was a private drone. Okay, thank you for clarifying.
I think that was
Yes.
So right now, point of order, we have a motion, do we have a second? There is a second, okay. So now we have a discussion, do we want to have this public meeting? And Juan, you have your hands up.
Okay. So I think that in the past, the Neighborhoods Commission has discussed the need to be effective, and I think that I could not support the motion to schedule a community meeting at this time, because I think that as a prerequisite, what we need, what the commission and what the community need, is a draft proposal. There's been a lot of feedback. I'm getting the sense that there's been a lot of meetings between the police department and other community groups. And I think that whether the Neighborhoods Commission drafts a proposed policy, or whether we get one from the police department or from the city manager's office, wherever we get that, we need something to discuss. We need something for people to give feedback on. We could hold countless meetings and hear concerns over and over, hear pros and cons, but we need something to talk about. We need something to get people to say yes or no to. And so I think that the next step is to determine how to come up with a proposed policy.
So you recommend waiting until after sometime next year then?
I personally think that December is too ambitious anyway. So whenever we get that proposed policy sometime after that, I would think that, yes, early next year is probably more realistic.
Is there anything holding back the SJPD from inserting the policy in its draft form that you currently have in time for a December 6th meeting?
I don't have any draft policy right now. And that was part of tonight. It sounds to me like what you're saying is, yes, draft some sort of policy, because this is something we're interested in looking at. And so certainly we could draft a policy and bring some of these things together. I don't know, I don't think that realistically we could do that by December 6th. It would have to be sometime after that.
Gary?
Yeah, I'm okay with the meeting, but I think there'd be more people, based on what I've heard tonight. A lot of people heard about this at the last minute. This got publicity, we get a bigger attendance. My concern would be, or my hope would be, that the people coming in from the police department would be smarter as a result of this meeting and hearing the questions that were fielded in the comments, that would be an update, not a repeat, essentially, of this meeting. So there'd be some, progress from point A to point B, and presenting it what would be at that next meeting.
I view it kind of iteratively too. I've learned enough to ask some more questions next time, and hopefully you learn some more from us to have better answers so that we can both progress.
It's kind of like a dry run.
So do you want to respond?
I can always be smarter, that's for sure. I think that certainly this has been very beneficial, and there's a lot of facets to this. And what I've heard is a lot of support. I've heard some concern. I think that we could draft some policy that maybe, like Mr. Dearborn said, kind of generally on a big, looking at it from a more general perspective, that we could come up with some of those things. And instead tonight, my goal tonight was to come in and kind of see where we were, what the feeling was. And I kind of feel like there's some support with some concern. So I think that if we took that and moved that to the next step, for me, would be that we say that, okay, this is what we would suggest. We would suggest that given these specific circumstances, that maybe we try it for a year and kind of do a pilot project where we just use it in these very specific circumstances. We bring some of these issues that have come up tonight about, are you going to have video? How long are you going to keep the video for? Those kinds of things. Could be some things that we could start working on by a December 6th meeting. I do think, though, that if we have a community meeting, while it might be somewhat repetitive for all of us, to inform that community meeting, I'm still going to have to go through a lot of this to explain to them kind of where we are, and maybe we could talk about some of the things that we've heard and some of the ideas that we have, and maybe that would be the next step.
So in the aerospace engineering, you have a straw man idea. You put something out for everybody to shoot arrows at, and that's sort of what you've done here. We're just starting, right now we're just kind of at the whiteboard stage. At this first meeting, you'd have a straw man, everybody shoots arrows at it, and then you get a better idea of what policy should be. So I could see some use, but you wanted, Dave?
Just to kind of reframe what I mentioned earlier, you just mentioned. Policies are dry, they're technical, and they put people to sleep if you can stay on them long enough to finish reading them. But maybe a half a page executive summary of what you would like to achieve in developing a comfortable framework of limited use, and assuage the fears many people have from a lack of knowledge of private versus agency versus military versus toy drones. This is a camera, like you carry a gun, you carry a camera, you carry a car, you drive a car. It's another tool. How are you going to use it?
Dan?
Yeah, one thing that I have heard from the community, definitely about the concerns here, but because of the price tag on these, it's not exclusive use to the police. My question is, how you guys need to identify your drones versus others, because the concerns out there are definitely, they're available, I can get one. What's going to identify a police drone versus a private drone out there that's out there circulating around? And it'd be good to know if there is any kind of ability for the police to take down other drones that are not the police. I heard that quite a few times out there. I think that's a big concern, is that you guys may use it once or twice, but people see them all over the place, so how are they going to identify which one is?
Would that be a red light that goes like this?
Linda Locke from District 4. I agree with David. It doesn't need to be a policy. If I want to get my neighborhood out, we have a meeting every month, and we have 45 to 50 people at all our meetings, and they're just general information. But if I want them to come here, I need an outline. I need something. I don't want them to say, do we want the drone or not? Because they're all going to come in upset. And that's why if you just give us some parameters, like the information that came tonight, these are the things that we would discuss. This is what you're looking at, how you're going to use it. And then that way we can send it out to our folks and try to get in here. Okay, thank you.
So shall we call, there's a motion that we do host another.
Well, we need, I think.
I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
Excuse me. We actually need some things to be done that I think the PD could be a great part of this. Is we need, according to what I've heard from these people here, is what are the people's rights? You know, what are we doing as far as the court systems go for all this information? I know that if you have a cell phone and you take pictures of people, the police can take it away, and then they can use those pictures.
Against that.
Well, this is what I thought. Maybe I've been watching too much television, but these are the rules that I'd like to see put down for a discussion. So when we get together, we know what the rules, the laws are for the drones too. You know, all these things that need to be looked at.
Okay, so it's 8 o'clock and we have two other items on the agenda tonight too. So there is a question, there is a motion that yes, we do host a community forum meeting here December 6th, 10 a.m. to noon. And there's a second, let me call the question now. Should we host such a meeting? All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, so let me count that. All in favor of hosting the meeting?
I'm sorry, in favor?
In favor of hosting the meeting?
In favor.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And opposed? Huh? I think so. And then opposed? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Never seems as a close vote. I don't think we counted it. Do we need to have a quorum, or is that
No.
8 to 7 a sufficient to pass to have?
Yeah, majority rules.
Sometimes it has to be a majority of the entire board, which would have been 11. That's why I asked.
Larry?
Yeah.
Is this okay with the department?
Is this what you wanted?
Yes, absolutely. We will have the meeting and come forward and have,
And
as you suggested, somewhat.
Would you like to
of
have a
phrase.
small ad hoc committee help you prepare some charts beforehand, or would that help?
I don't think so. I think that we'll put something, what you've done is you've given us, you've empowered us to say, yes, this is something we're interested in. We'd like you to go the next step. So now we will go to the next step. It isn't, I think, now pretentious of us to come forward and say, this is what we think would be good. This discussion has helped inform us that this is something that you would like us to do. So we will create some ideas of what we think would be best for the use and go over some of these issues. Some of the legal issues, I'm a little weary of getting into some of those legal issues because I'm not, the police department isn't necessarily the best group to talk to that. We will have city attorney review, but we can maybe address some of those issues as we understand them. And understanding that we do want to ensure that we have Fourth Amendment protections and we're very aware of privacy protections and those kinds of things. So maybe to that extent we could address some of those things.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, so those that wanted the meeting want it now, and several of those that voted against it just were worried about the timing. So I think there is interest in this thing. So we'll have a meeting here December 6th at 10 a.m. We'll try to get the word out better. And, thank you for coming. Thank you for coming, and let us move on. So we spent all this time talking about drones. There are three other issues on that thing too. So first one was the sharing of the police camera of the cameras. That's all one done deal. The second one was cameras in fixed locations, hotspots. See who's going to, Angelique? On the hotspot cameras, how many are there and where are they?
The program has not been implemented.
Has not been implemented. So is that something also we're supposed to
No, it's not.
weigh in on?
We'll bring that back before the commission for discussion like this when it's ready.
Okay. And then body worn cameras, that's also for the future.
Correct.
Okay. One down, two to go.